Welcome back, everybody. We are going to talk a little bit about parliamentary procedure today. Hopefully, you watched the video that was at the top of this page. Um, it's kind of funny to watch, yes, and it kind of turns into a train wreck pretty quickly. But if you've ever been in a meeting, sometimes that's the way things go. Recently, I was in a meeting where we were trying to discuss how scheduling was going to be because of coronavirus, and it well, there was no name calling, but it just was not the most effective meeting. So, one of the ways that we can make sure that we are having a productive meeting is by using parliamentary procedure. I know that sometimes it seems a little bit formal to use parliamentary procedure, but it does help to quicken the meeting and it does help to make sure that things are kept in order. So, parliamentary procedure is it's just a system of using rules that were established through the book Robert's Rules of Order to help keep meetings on track and well organized. The book of Parliamentary Authority by Henry M. Robert is the book that we use, Robert's Rules of Order. It's a pretty big book. It's about an inch and a half thick, so there are a lot of rules, but you're not going to have to learn all of them. We will do some basic ones so that you pretty much understand how to know what's going on during a meeting. Most organizations have got a constitution or bylaws that are a document that governs the operations of the organization and says how they're going to operate in a proper manner and the rules that they're going to have established. So typically you do have some rules ahead of time whenever you get ready to work within an organization. Just some terms that you need to be familiar with. The actual group of people that's meeting and are the voting delegates, the people that are going to get to vote during the meeting, can be called several things. Sometimes you hear it called the floor. Sometimes you hear it called the body of members. You may hear it called the House. You may hear it called the Assembly. There are a lot of different names that are actually associated with this particular group. Normally, when you get ready to start a meeting, hopefully you have an agenda whenever you go into that meeting. It is not always the case, but it does make life a whole lot easier whenever you walk into a meeting and you know exactly what's going to be discussed. So, hopefully, when you get ready to go into a meeting, somebody gives you a sheet of paper or you have one emailed to you ahead of time, and it's just a list of things that you're going to discuss. And this is done prior to the meeting so that you're not getting in there and things are just coming up in your meeting all day. You may also hear the term order of business. They're not always the same, but they are pretty closely related. The order of business, like the agenda, is a list of things that you'll see in a meeting. Sometimes the order of business will actually put more information than what you'll see in an agenda. An agenda is usually just an outline, but sometimes with an order of business, you'll actually see more information that's listed, and you can see the sample order of business that's on the screen. This is one that is typically followed by FFA chapters if they're having a business meeting. There will be a call to order that is done by the chapter president or the presiding officer. They'll look at the minutes of the previous meeting. Now, that has nothing to do with time. That's not, saying, oh, we met for 30 minutes about this subject. It is actually just the notes from what happened at the previous meeting. Sometimes you'll see a treasurer's report or some other committee reports. Sometimes you didn't finish something at the last meeting, and that's called old business. The last thing typically that is covered is going to be new business, and then there will be an adjournment. An adjournment just means that you have finished with the business of the meeting. The term that is used for the person who is in charge of the meeting, sometimes it's our president. Usually it is our president when we're talking about FFA, but the actual term for the person presiding over the meeting is the chair. The proper way to address them as far as if it is the president is Mr. or Madam President, or they can be Mr. or Madam Chairperson. But typically it's usually called the chair, regardless of whether it's the president or whoever's presiding over the meeting. The term quorum. When we think about the term quorum, you are basically thinking about the number of people that have to be present at a meeting in order for business to take place. Normally, this is established by the bylaws, but it can be just kind of a general number. A lot of times, it's usually one more than half of the membership. There was a time several years ago where I was on a board and we were getting ready to have a meeting and we did not have enough people to actually have a quorum. And so we could discuss things and we could talk about things, but we couldn't actually conduct business. So it is important to make sure that you have the number of people that are necessary to conduct business at a meeting. Otherwise, you might have 2 or 3 people that are making decisions for an entire group. And so that's why the quorum is important. Parliamentary abilities, we're going to learn a little bit about those just a little bit later. These are abilities that are used, they're motions that are used during a meeting in order to conduct business, in order to dispose of main motions, or to help get business across. So we will talk more about parliamentary abilities in just a little bit. One of the things you probably heard whenever you go into meetings is people saying, all in favor say aye, all opposed say no. Typically, whenever you have a motion during a meeting, the motion is going to be voted upon. Now, there's different ways to do that, and we'll get into those in a few minutes, but a majority vote is more than half. So let's say, for instance, we had 24 people in class and we were voting on something. A majority vote would be one more than half, which would be 13 people. And so that one is pretty easy. And usually that's done whenever you're just doing kind of basic business. The 2/3 majority that you see is often done whenever you're limiting the rights of the members. Let's say, for instance, that you have a rule sometimes that you wear official dress in a meeting, but maybe it's going to be 90 degrees outside, or maybe you're going to be outside and you're going to be getting muddy and you don't want to wear official dress. And so you're going to suspend the rules to wear official dress at a meeting. And in order to do that, because it is a rule that you typically have and you're changing what's normal, you have to have a 2/3 majority vote in order to be able to do that. So we do that sometimes whenever we are discussing things, sometimes whenever we have rules, sometimes when we're making nominations and things like that. A lot of times it's often done whenever you are changing the bylaws or the Constitution as well. So there are 4 things that we want to accomplish whenever we are using parliamentary procedure. We call them the 4 tenets of parliamentary procedure. The first one is extending courtesy to everyone. If you've ever been in a situation where you're in a meeting and they're not using parliamentary procedure, sometimes it's kind of like people are talking over one another. Maybe it's like your family at Thanksgiving, whenever you have 20 people around a table and there's all different kinds of conversations going on. When that type of thing happens, you don't get a whole lot of business accomplished. I mentioned that I was in a meeting last week, and that's kind of what was going on. We had a main topic we were all discussing, but you had different conversations going on at side tables. Whenever you're using parliamentary procedure, you have one person that is directing the traffic for the entire meeting, and they are making sure that only one person speaks at a time so that everybody can hear what they have to say, and everybody that wants to have an opportunity to say something can have an opportunity to say something. So in order for you to be able to speak up at a meeting where they're using parliamentary procedure, you do have to be recognized by the chair, so that you can get your point across. That also helps us to focus on one thing at a time. Again, if you don't have this type of thing going on, in that meeting that I was in the other day, you had some people that were talking about one particular topic and some people that were talking about another particular topic, and it was all kind of a hodgepodge. So focusing on one item at a time is pretty important, and that gives you an opportunity to finish with one piece of business before you move on to another. It observes the rule of the majority. So let's say, for instance, that, well, we might have to take a virtual field trip this time, but let's say we wanted to take a virtual field trip and we wanted to go to Broad River Greenway. Well, maybe there was a group that decided that, they didn't like the idea of being out in the woods, and that they would rather go to a park instead of Broad River Greenway. Um, at that particular point, we're going to vote and we're going to listen to the entire group. But the group that has the largest number of votes is going to be the group that we go with, because that's what the majority chooses. It's just the fairest way of doing things. You're never going to get into a group and the entire group is going to agree on everything. So normally you're looking at majority ruling on that. Typically, it's going to be just a simple majority, one more than half. But it does protect the rights of the minority. So that group that didn't want to go to Broad River Greenway, they wanted to go to the park instead, we're going to listen to them, and we're going to give them an opportunity to tell us why. And maybe they should have an opportunity to give their opinions, and it's a chance for them to potentially sway people over to their side. But we are going to listen to what they have to say, and if they do convince people and they become a majority, great. If they don't, then they still had their opportunity to be heard. Okay, so if you have ever watched the Austin Powers movies, you know that this guy on the bottom of the screen is Dr. Evil, and he's not exactly the best presiding officer for a meeting. If you've seen the movies, he doesn't exactly like people to give their opinions. He kind of wants to tell people what their opinions are. And if they don't have the same opinion as him, he pushes a button and they fall through the floor and they get eaten by sharks with laser beams on their heads. So we want to make sure that we don't have a chairperson that is acting in the same manner as Dr. Evil. Hopefully, your presiding officer can keep the meeting moving, keep it moving in a smooth fashion so that everything is kind of done in a timely way. They should be fair, they should be impartial. They really can't give their own opinion. Dr. Evil here, if you don't like his opinion, he tries to get you quiet. But every person should have an opportunity with a fair and impartial presiding officer. If they do want to give their opinion, it's okay, but in order to be able to do that, they do have to relinquish the chair. Typically, they're going to call the vice president up and have the vice president chair the meeting while they are giving their point of view. And then they will reassume the duties of the chair once that's over. The gavel. You probably have seen one of these before, but you probably have seen it in TV shows where they have a court type setting. The gavel we use with our FFA opening ceremony. We also use it with parliamentary procedure, and there are different meanings of different taps of the gavel. The presiding officer should not abuse the gavel or throw the gavel or at anybody or anything like that. It is an opportunity for them to control a meeting, but not necessarily an opportunity for them to abuse power. The gavel should be used before or when you're telling the group to sit down. So if they're standing and you want them to sit, you tap the gavel once. You do it after a motion is passed or failed, and at the end of the meeting, whenever you get ready to adjourn. Normally, you will hear 2 taps of a gavel as a meeting is called to order. 3 taps will tell all members to stand in unison, so everybody stands up at the same time. And then a series of taps can be used to help restore order, which you probably have seen on TV shows, and it's probably where you're most familiar with somebody saying order in the court, and they tap the gavel several times. That's exactly the same thing within our FFA organization. If we're trying to get somebody's attention, is we tap it several times. Discussions are an important part a parliamentary procedure because it gives people an opportunity to be able to give their input. It gives them an opportunity to be able to discuss a motion and tell why or why not we should be doing a particular motion. And so it should be more than just say, oh, I agree with so and so. It actually should give a reason. I agree with this person because I agree that maybe we shouldn't go to Broad River Greenway because I don't like snakes and I don't want to accidentally walk up upon a snake. And so, our discussion should actually be focused around what's going on with that particular motion, but should be more than just I agree or I disagree. Tell us why. Normally, the member who made the motion should have the first opportunity to discuss because they should be telling us why they made that motion. Why is it important to them? And give them an opportunity to tell why they think it should happen. If you kind of get into a situation where lots of people are trying to speak, it is a good idea to give those people who have not had an opportunity to speak that opportunity to do it. You shouldn't have one person monopolizing the conversation. If possible, and you kind of know what's going on, and the chair can tell who's for and who's against something, it's a good opportunity to alternate discussion between those people who are for and who are against. And sometimes that's not possible, but it does give an opportunity to get different viewpoints. So there's 4 methods of voting. And the one that you're probably most familiar with is the one where somebody says, all in favor say aye, all opposed say no. And that one is probably the one that's most used in parliamentary procedure. The reason is because it's easy, and most of the time it's pretty simple to be able to tell, who thinks what. Normally you have a pretty large group on one side versus the other. And there is a way to get around it if you can't tell, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But most of the time you can tell whether most of the group is in favor just by a voice vote. And it's something that you do usually when you just have a regular old motion. Sometimes you need to have a counted vote so that you know how many people voted one way versus another. And that counted vote usually is taken by having members to stand or raise their hand. That way they can tell how things were actually counted. But you also know who voted which way as well. Sometimes, and this is what's done in Congress and in our state legislature, we use roll call. And in fact, if you've ever had an opportunity to go to our legislature, you sit in the gallery and you actually can see down on the tables where the people who are getting ready to vote, the senators and the congressmen, have an opportunity to, when they have a vote, they have a yay and a nay button, and it actually pops up on a screen on the side in there so you can see who voted which way. Finally, there is secret ballot. A lot of times this is done whenever personal feelings might be involved, whenever you are voting for officers or something like that. A secret ballot is often used just to help to preserve feelings, so that everybody doesn't know how somebody votes. That's what we do whenever we vote for politicians. And to be honest, it's probably the way where people can most freely give their opinion because they don't have to worry about people knowing how they voted. So if you want to have an opportunity to have secrecy whenever you vote on something, secret ballot is the best way to do that. Okay, on this page, there will be a video that shows the steps in making and disposing of a main motion. And the reason I'm going to put a video on there is because I can only do one voice at a time. And so if I could do 2 voices, then I would try and have a conversation with myself, but I'm not going to try and pull that off. So make sure that you check out the video of the main motion, and you should be able to see all these steps that are happening during that particular main motion. The member will address the presiding officer, Mr. and Madam President, and that officer will give them recognition to speak, and then they will say, I move to, or I move that, and that's how we do the main motion. Another member has to second the motion just to make sure that there's at least two people that are interested. And then the chair will give an opportunity to discuss the motion. And then after that, there will be a vote taken, and that will be announced. So make sure to check out the video on steps of making and disposing of a main motion. It will be a quick video that just shows you how to do a main motion. And then after that, make sure that you come back so that you can learn a little bit more about parliamentary procedure abilities. See you soon.